I love that song. I always have loved Soundgarden. When I was a teenager, that was the music that was on the radio and on MTV when they actually played videos. Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots. All that music holds a special place in my heart. And it's a great amp sound we hear. Most of the time, if we think of a dual rectifier, we think of that stamped diamond plate head, 412 cabinet, and we think of a high gain tone. But really, even in the dual rectifier solo head, there's a lot more tones than just, there's a lot more good tones than just that high gain sound. And if we start talking about a Tremoverb dual rectifier, which is the subject that this video is about, we really get into a lot of versatility. And I'm going to show you some sound examples from some very famous players that aren't your typical dual rectifier sound. A very clean tone in some of them. And I'm going to play you some sound examples. So stick around. We're going to talk about the Mesa Boogie dual rectifier Tremoverb. In the thumbnail for the video, I say the Tremoverb is the best dual rectifier. And that's not clickbait to get you to watch the video. I really believe that. Back in '94, when I got my amp, Mesas were very boutique. There was only one shop in Louisville, Kentucky that carried Mesa Boogie. And they had 3 rectifiers all lined up. A dual rectifier solo head, the Tremoverb, and a triple rectifier. And for me, the Tremoverb won out hands down. The triple rectifier was so loud it would just rip your head off. But still, the Tremoverb had something that triple rectifier didn't have, even with the extra volume. And it was almost more high fidelity than the other two. There was a lot of great amps out at the time. I played a Fender Vibro King, the one with 310s that was pretty big in the 90s, a great sounding amp too. I played an original Blockletter 5150. All of these amps, I was trying to find something that suited me, something that I really wanted and that really sounded good because it was going to be an amp that stayed with me, and it has. I was going through my old paperwork. It seems I have paperwork on every amp that Mesa had out in '94, and I have this paperwork. It's a price guide from 1994. I'll post some close-up pictures in case you want to follow along. Maybe you have an old Mesa amp. Actually, the Tremoverb was the most expensive in the lineup back then. The combo was $16.95, like you saw Kim Thale playing. The head was $14.95. The Mark IV was out at the time. It was $15.95. That triple rectifier was $14.45. The dual rectifier solo head was $12.95. The Maverick was brand new in '94. It says it was $11.95. I'll post this so you can see what the prices looked like back then and just take a trip down memory lane. Lately, I'm pretty happy with how the channel's doing. I feel like you guys can see a difference in the video editing. My audio's on point. The thumbnails are looking good. I have a lot of ideas for upcoming videos, and this is all because I love music and I want to share it. And I'm up over 100 subscribers now. I want to keep that ball rolling, and I need your help to do it. Subscribe, leave me a comment, like the video. It all helps to get these videos out there. And I've got some interesting things that I want to do, some gear giveaway things for subscribers. All that's upcoming. Like, subscribe, leave me a comment, help me out. Let's get these videos out, and I'm going to keep the content coming. I'm always in the studio. It's what I love doing.
Loving you isn't the right thing to do. How can I ever change things that I feel?
honest reviews are something that's very important to me. I think for a channel and for a person to have integrity, the reviews need to be honest. Everything they say from that standpoint needs to come from a place that's fair and sees both sides. So we're going to go through the positives and the negatives of the Tremoverb amp. I've had it for a long time. I know what's good about it. I know what's bad about it. And we're going to look at the front and back control panels. Some of the stuff that's on there is more suited to a player from the 80s or the 90s. It's an old amp. So we're going to look at that stuff. And let's start with the front control panel. Going left to right, you have the power on-off switch and the standby. Then you have the tremolo. Each channel, there's an orange and a red channel. Each channel has its own separate tremolo. So if you have just one part in the song that has tremolo, you can set the amp up that way. Then we go to the loop active master control, and this is the master volume for the loop. Now that's one of the negatives of this amp. There is some tone suck if you use the loop. It doesn't sound as good as just the normal orange or red channel with no loop activated. It doesn't really matter to me because I use all my effects in front. When I use delay, I use the mix knob and keep it very low mix and use something like Echoplex most of the time. So it's not really affecting my sound. I think it sounds good that way into the front. After the loop master volume control, you have the master for each channel. What I like about this amp by comparison to other Mesa Boogie amps, you hear people say a lot of times it's too many knobs and too many switches. The Tremoverb isn't that. It's a very simple layout. You have an orange and a red channel, and for each of those channels, you have 2 rows of knobs. They're both identical. So you have a master for the orange and the red, a reverb, presence, bass, mid, treble, and gain. And another cool thing about this amp is each channel has 2 gain structures. So on the orange channel, you have a clean setting and a vintage high gain. You move over to the red channel, you have blues and modern high gain. And if you want to use both of the gain structures from the orange channel or the red channel, on the back you have the option to channel clone. This means if you want the clean and the vintage high gain, both of the settings from the orange channel, you can switch one of those red channels over to be the other gain structure from the orange channel, and vice versa. If you want both the blues and the modern high gain sounds, you can clone the orange channel to do that. It's a very useful feature. That way, any 2 combinations of gain structure you want in the amp, you can get just by the foot switch. We definitely need to touch on the low end that rectifiers have. A common thing for people to do is to put a tube screamer or another type of distortion or overdrive before their high gain channel in their rectifier. This isn't necessarily to add more gain, but to add EQ, to high pass that muddy frequency that you can get going straight into a dirty channel on a rectifier. On the sound example you heard, that was guitar straight into amp with no gain pedal, but in my DAW, I did high pass on my Neve channel strip at 70 hertz. So this is doing the same thing as adding a tube screamer. A lot of times I'll do it with my Tim pedal or sometimes my clone, Warm Audio Centavo. Any of these methods will work. The low end tends to get muddy, especially in a mix, but it's a great sound. You just have to high pass it in some way. There's a lot of ways to do it. Also, I have an XTS modded Boss EQ. That's another way to do it. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of high gain amps are like that, especially when you're talking about 4x12 cabinets. That's a big cabinet, and a lot of resonant frequencies can build up in there. I find it very interesting that Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac also chooses a Tremoverb as his clean tone live amp. He's a guitarist that's known for his clean tone. He developed a style of finger picking which uses that clean tone, and it's been on countless #1 hits. When a lot of those hits were recorded, he was using high watts and Marshalls, and the Tremoverb very accurately recreates those tones. Here in my studio, I have another great clean tone amp, a 67 Drip Edge Twin, and they're very different. Even though they have some of the same features like the tremolo and the reverb, the sounds are very different. I use the Fender Clean Tone a lot in my recordings, as well as the Mesa, but the Fender Clean Tone is very mid-rangey. It's almost painful to be in the room with at any level of volume. The Tremoverb isn't that. It's more smooth. Even though you're going through 412s, it's a little more wattage than the Twin. It's not nearly as strident. Lastly, I want to talk about some of the features on the back panel of the amp. Let's start with the slave out. This may be a bit outdated now. There's other ways to take a line out off of the amp. A lot of amps have a direct out on them now, but in the 80s and 90s, it was very popular to slave a power amp to your amp and push other speakers with it. Maybe use it for your wet effects. Different people did different things with it. I know Eddie Van Halen used it. I've never slaved an amp, and it's probably a great sound. There's probably just more efficient ways to do it now. So it might be one of those concepts we've outgrown a little bit with time and technology. Also on the back of the amp, we have a rectifier select where you can choose vacuum tube mode, which is normal mode, or silicon diodes, which is high power, both of which sound good. Also, you have a spongy and a bold setting. Also, both of those sound good. I've used it both ways. Then you have the channel cloning where you can clone the orange to the red channel and vice versa. Very useful in this amp. And it was also one of the first amplifiers that I know about where it would accept either 6L6 or EL34 tubes. They came stock, at least mine did, with the 6L6s. Sounded great, so I've never changed them to EL34s when I've changed tubes. And that about wraps us up on all the features of the amp. If you liked the video, comment, subscribe, like the video, and we'll see you next time. I have a lot of ideas and a lot of videos coming.